Are you stressed? Do you worry about your job? Do you worry about... We're talking about stress, okay, and how to deal with it, okay? I'd imagine we're talking primarily about psychological, psychosocial stress. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I don't think when people talk about stress, they're talking about the stress of lifting, the stress of their nutrition. Maybe they are talking about the stress of, you know, sticking to their nutrition protocol, but the majority of people, when they think of stress, they're thinking of people like pulling their hair out at their desk in work. Would you agree? Yeah?
Yeah, that's fair enough, I think.
So, dealing with that, what's the crack? How are we actually going to deal with that? Because like we could talk all day about the subtle nuances of what's actually happening when you get stressed, and you know, like all the eustress and all these.
But you're in the militia and you've read the articles on that.
Exactly, right. But how do we actually deal with this? How do we actually deal with the stressors of life? Are we focusing on lifestyle changes? You know, are we doing some hippie stuff, breathing, sleeping more? You know, are we centering ourselves, aligning our chakras?
Yeah.
What's the crack? Are we supplementing? What's the story? Like,
let's have a talk. Step 1, organize. Actually, no, that's not step 1. Step 1, identify the stressors. Okay? If you don't know what is stressing you out and why it's stressing you out, then you can never address it. And I think a lot of people kind of make this mistake. You know, I've used the example before, people think that college stresses them out, and they think that exams stress them out. And when you actually break it down, it's not the exam that's stressing you out, it's the fact that you didn't prepare for the exam and now you don't feel prepared, so now you're in a position where you feel like you're not going to do as well as you maybe should, and you feel overwhelmed because you know you have too much to do relative to the time that you have available. And that's what's actually stressing you out. So I think if you think of it in terms of that, and then you move on to the next thing that I'm going to talk about, is actually organizing your life. So if we take that example of exam stress, because I think it's the most relatable one, because even if you work a job, you probably have deadlines and things like that, and you can relate to it. Like, organizing your life is probably the most important thing, I would say anyway, for actually managing your total stressors. Because let's say you had invested, like, let's say it's exam week and you have like 5 modules or whatever, 5 exams in the 1 week, and you're trying to do like 30 hours of study, whereas you could have invested like an hour a day every day throughout the semester, and it wouldn't have seemed like a big deal. Like 1 hour a day is really,
that's all I do.
Yeah, like it's really nothing, but when it all kind of adds up, like you have very little to revise at the end of the semester, because you're in a position where, oh, I've actually read all this before, so I'll just read over quickly, refresh my memory, boom, too easy. But if you're more so in the position where you're trying to read everything at once, it's not going to happen. You're going to stress yourself out, and now you've got this massive abundance of stress for the last maybe 4 weeks of the semester, where the first 2 are you worrying about being stressed for the last 2, and then the last 2 are you being stuck in the mud. So yeah, organize your life. So if you can identify the stressors that are there, such as your exam stress, job stress, or whatever, then think about the things that you can actually do to make your life a little bit easier. So if we think about, let's say, your health and fitness journey, if that's what you want to call it, you know that you have to prepare your meals, for example. What a lot of people will do is just kind of wake up in the morning, know that they have some sort of caloric target to hit, and they'll be like, oh damn it, it's too late to cook my meals now, so I'm going to go to work, I didn't have breakfast. And then you're trying to play catch up throughout the day, you're sitting at your desk, you're worried about when you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, as opposed to the night before saying, alright, prepping all my meals, I know when I'm going to eat these meals, boom, now that's not on your mind for the day. What else would you add in there in terms of organizing your life to minimize stressors?
Yeah, no, a lot of that, like it comes down to actually identifying the things. And like you said, like some of the things you think of as stressors, like, oh, exams are the stress. That might not actually be the stress. That might be what's triggering the stress, but that's not what's actually causing the stress. It's your lack or inability, perhaps, to actually do the work before you get to the exam. You know, so maybe you do need that little bit of pressure of having an exam, but guess what? The exam's there 12 weeks out as well, rather than just like a week out. Oh shit, I have an exam. Like you knew it was going to be there the whole time. Like you should not be stressed. Like it should, the day before where you're like, oh, what's going to come up? You know, maybe a little bit of stress there, but you should not be feeling like overwhelmed, thinking, I don't know anything, I don't know any content here. You know, you should already have that. Like at the exam, especially going up to exams, it should just be rehashing the content, going, oh yeah, I remember that. I'm just going to draw that diagram or whatever just to kind of refresh it in my mind. And this is the same way, if you have a deadline for work or whatever, it's like, okay, you knew this deadline was coming, whatever, even if it's 2-3 weeks into the thing. If you started the day before, obviously you're going to feel stressed. And with work, it's a little bit different because there's constantly stuff going on. People think in college it's hard. It's like, oh, I have this project and I have this thing. It's like, yeah, cool. They give you an outline of exactly what you have to do.
And you have so much time off to do it.
You have so much time off, especially if you do something like arts. Like in one of my days, doing science, you're pretty much do the entire arts week. And then obviously arts does have to do, they have to read a shitload and they have to write a shitload. But it's still you actually have more time to do things. You can essentially have a full-time job and do an arts degree. So no hate on arts, but
no hate.
Yeah, you have this time, whether you're a science student, whether you're I don't know, I'm sure there's courses that have 60-hour weeks or whatever. You still have time outside of that. It might not be the most enthralling thing for you to do outside of that on your own time, but it will prevent the stress down the road. So if you are the type of person that's I get really, really stressed out with all these things, maybe setting up your days well in advance to get rid of that stress is going to be beneficial for you. So yeah, I think actually prioritizing and executing is going to take away I'm going to say a ridiculous amount, 90% of people's stresses.
Yeah, genuinely. If you have a consistent wake up time, a consistent bedtime, if you know you have reading to do during the day, block that time off. If you know you have to go to the gym during the day, block that time off. Block your meal prep time off. Suddenly all the things that kind of worry people, maybe blocking time off with your girlfriend or boyfriend, suddenly all of those things are kind of gone, and that's the majority of what you need to do outside of your college or your actual work day. So then you can actually just knuckle down and just do that, and then suddenly you're oh, actually not quite as stressed anymore. But one of the problems is 24 hours in a day seems like a lot. You take away sleep, blah 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 blah, you're left with a lot of time that you're actually spending on recreation. A lot of people will say they're stressed, but they'll watch Netflix for 3 hours. That's another thing. Once you've actually organized the important things in your life, the next thing you need to do is actually remove the things that are not helping you. Even things as simple as if you know social media is a stressor because it's stopping you from doing the things you know you need to do right now, then deleting the apps off your phone for most of the day and maybe checking them at some period in the day.
Yeah, I don't have any social media apps on my phone because I know I just waste all my time there. Even if it's just something simple I'm waiting for a coffee to the kettle to boil, and it's I'll just go on Instagram, and then the kettle's boiled and I'm still on Instagram for an extra 2 minutes. That's 2 minutes I've just wasted. And then I'm later in the day and going, I wish I had an extra 3 minutes to get this email done before I'm supposed to do this other thing. And it's I did have those 2 minutes. I did have that extra time. I just wasted it. So it might seem almost inconsequential, and you might go oh well, I don't want to have my life dictated by this calendar that I have to follow exactly like this. But it actually gives you more free time.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it sounds really stressful living by a calendar, but the thing is when you start to organize your life, you also factor in free time, because then you actually end up having more of that, because the person that is kind of on and off, real inefficient with their work, the person that's you go to their house and they're sitting watching TV and you ask them to go do something and they're oh no, I have to study, and it's why aren't you doing the study already?
Yeah,
because then life becomes way more enjoyable when you actually have that discipline. You block off time, because then you end up with the 3 hours of free time that would have been 3 hours of procrastination in the past, and now that is acting as a de-stressor, because you're able to go play football with the lads or go do makeup with the girls or whatever.
Oh, is that what girls do? Yeah,
they just hang out and just
after they shave their shoulders and stuff but yeah, no, 100%. The more you have organized, the easier life actually is. And we're not saying you have to get fancy apps or something like Google Calendars or any kind of calendar app. Just okay, these are the kind of things. Write them down and be these are the kind of things I want to get done today. These are the kind of times I'm booking off for them. Doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to fuck up. There's going to be things this is going to take an extra half hour than you thought it's going to do. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just having a rough structure for your day is going to make it so much easier. Right, so they've got their life organized. They've got, they're kind of getting their head around okay, well, if I work now, that's actually an emotional quotient, that EQ. Everyone talks about IQ, but EQ is your emotional intelligence, so to speak, and they always do that test where it's the person comes in with a cookie, says to the kid, like, don't eat this cookie, I'll come back in a while, and if you haven't eaten this cookie, I'll give you another one. So you can get 2 cookies, or you can eat the cookie now and get 1. And the majority of people, like, if you have low EQ, you're gonna take the cookie now, eat it, fucking who cares if the person's gonna come back with another one, I've already eaten this, see you later, right? So a lot of people will do that. The most successful ones will delay that gratification. They're like, I know I'd love a cookie right now, but I'm going to delay this gratification, and I'm actually going to get more by having 2. So the great thing about EQ, like, you can actually work on it. You can actually build your EQ. Like, you can actually become more emotionally intelligent and go, all right, there's this momentary pleasure that I could definitely indulge in. Like, I would love a cookie right now, but if I don't have this cookie, metaphorically speaking, if I do this work right now, you know, I'll be able to have 2 cookies later on. I'll be able to, you know, stress-free, hang out with my girlfriend, hang out with my friends, you know, do whatever it is. Because a lot of the time people are like stressed because they're not, and I hate when people talk about, I have to be present and I need to work on being present. A lot of these people can't be present because they haven't done the work. You know, so they're like, oh, I'm thinking of all these other things. It's like, yeah, they would be a no factor if you've already done them. You know, you're with your girlfriend and you're like, I can't get work off my mind, I have this thing to do and I have this thing to do. And it's like, all right, well, let's go to your work day. And you're like, you wasted 4 hours here doing nothing. You know, you could have had the thing done, and then you wouldn't have thought about it. You would have been present with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whoever the fuck, you know? So you do have to take that into account, that if you can delay that gratification and, you know, metaphorically speaking, avoid that cookie right now, you will get 2 cookies in the future. And I know it's kind of like, oh, well, obviously, you know, but I find it's hard to not procrastinate. It's like, yeah, that's great. That's what being an adult is. Like, you have to learn to, you know, get shit done.
Yeah.
You know? But, right, so stress, they're still dealing with it. They're kind of, okay, I'm going to organize my life. I've got things, you know, locked down. I've, you know, made out a plan. I've got my priorities in line, and I'm doing that. How else are we dealing with stress? Are we focusing on, you know, this hippie stuff, or what's the crack like?
Yeah, just to touch on the point that you just made there, because I think it's a really good point. Because I actually listened to an audiobook before, I read a book, I can't remember where it was.
You don't read, so there's definitely listen to.
Excuse me, I read loads of books.
You've never finished, you've finished like 1 book.
Yes, I have. I have finished loads of books. I used to not read. I have read in the past couple of years. Anyway, irrelevant. Whatever the book was, they were talking about that study that you referenced, like, it's not that it's just been done once, but that cookie study where they're looking at delayed gratification. And one of the things that was brought up quite a bit, and I think a lot of people bring up, is that, oh, that ability to exert delayed gratification, like, that is genetically determined, therefore that's it. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool, maybe you are predisposed to being a little bit poorer at that performance, but as you said, it's that, like, that EQ and that ability to kind of hold off and recognize, think about the future and think about what you're going to get back when you do kind of stop yourself. Like, that is trainable, and it's something you get better at over time. And I think that's something that's important to recognize, because a lot of people these days will just talk about things that are genetically determined or that we're predisposed to be like, and just say, yeah, so that's that, and just kind of have to accept it.
No, nobody, like, unless you actually study genetics, like, you should just not use it as an excuse, because it's not what you think it is, like 100%. Like, even in that study, like, I actually read that study, and I've read multiple studies like that, but they always have, like, you can always relate. People go, oh, it's genetic, this EQ is genetic, but it's not genetic, it's 100% epigenetic. Like, there's, like, I would posit a guess to say there's 0% genetic influence on it, right? But it appears to be genetic because the people that influence you are your parents. So if your parents are the type of people that will say, oh yeah, I'll be back in a while, and then take 3 hours to come back, and you're left at home thinking, oh, when are they going to come back? That is what the biggest correlator was with those kids not trusting the researcher to come back with a second cookie. They're like, well, yeah, he could come back, but my parents, like the people that I trust, the adults that I trust around me, they haven't shown themselves to be trustworthy, so I can't believe that he will actually come back with a second cookie. So I'm not going to delay the gratification, and I'm going to eat this cookie now, because who the fuck knows what's going to happen in the future. So it wasn't genetics, it wasn't any magic, it was 100% their epigenetics, so their environment. So guess what? You have control of your environment, especially if you're an adult. You can control who the people you hang around with. You can control the thoughts that you have. You are not a victim of your environment. So you can actually go, okay, yeah, like, I understand that the reason I'm doing this is because of this, is because of the experiences I've had in the past, but this is not the type of person that I want to be, so I'm going to change that. You know, you actually have that in your control. And yeah, you might have been through terrible things, but guess what? People have been through far worse than you and come out the other side a better person and become the person that they want to be. Like the one I always go is like Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Like he went to the gulags in the USSR and he just took personal responsibility for every single thing he did in his life, and he was like, I know what type of person I want to be, I know the type of man I want to be, and it's not this, you know, self-defeatist type of person. And he was in a gulag, like a proper gulag. Like you think concentration camps were bad, like gulags were worse, you know. So if he can do that, I think you can take responsibility of your actions. And yeah, okay, cool, your past might define you, but it doesn't have to define you. But anyway, right, they've got their life sorted.
You're in control.
What else are we focusing on?
Yeah, I think some of those more kind of woo-woo kind of things, like your meditation, guided breathing, or to be honest, even just getting out for a walk, can all be like quite useful in terms of actually just calming down your nervous system, slowing down your breathing, getting into a more parasympathetic, relaxed kind of a state. Like they're all quite useful when you are, especially when you are stressed, or even just first thing in the morning or last thing at night, because they're nice kind of ways to bookend your day and kind of clear the mind, whether that's in preparation for the day or whether it's in like for clearing your head from that stressful day. I think they're all quite useful. To be honest, like I think a lot of people like focus on like the whole headspace thing, and like a lot of it isn't actually meditation. Like a lot of people aren't getting into like a deep meditative state or anything, but it's just a case of them actually sitting down, breathing, and taking some time to kind of think, as opposed to being like flustered with all of the things they're trying to do in their day to day. What do you think about those
100%.
sort of things?
I really like meditation. I really like anything that's going to take you out of the now and bring you into yourself, because everyone's all talking about this, well, I have to be present, but like the reason you feel like shit, the reason you feel stressed out is because you are totally present in that moment. You can't step back and you can't see the bigger picture of things. So maybe being present isn't exactly what you want. You know, you want to actually be able to, you know, okay, this is the situation I'm in, why am I in this situation? You can't see the forest for the trees if you are in that hyper-focused kind of thing. So you need to be able to step back. So taking that time where it's like, okay, look, I'm feeling really stressed out, you know, I've made these poor decisions and that's the reason I'm stressed out, or someone has done something to me that's making me stressed out. It's like, okay, I'm just going to take a step back here and take a couple of deep, slow, full breaths, and then I'm going to be able to deal with the situation better, you know, because I can go, okay, so this is what I have to do to overcome this, rather than again, oh, my head is 100% in this, oh, I need to get this done, and I put this thing, and you're all over the place. It's like, okay, well now I can actually take a step back, prioritize, this is the task that's really giving me the most stress, need to get this done first, boom, next thing, you know. So all of those kind of hippie stuff have their place, you know. It's like, okay, whether it's even something as simple as like sleeping more. Yeah. You know, like actually prioritizing your sleep. Like people are kind of like, oh, well, obviously prioritize my sleep, but you kind of forget that it's like, okay, yeah, I do need to get 8 hours sleep, and if I'm not getting that, I'm going to be more stressed out. I'm going to feel like shit because I'm not actually recovered. So you do need to take that into account, that, you know, the lifestyle choices you make do impact your stress levels, especially stuff like sleep. Obviously, on top of that, you can add in some like breathing throughout the day, even getting an app like Headspace. I don't personally like it, but it can help a lot of people. So, you know, maybe something like that. Going to meditation classes, going to learn from someone how to meditate correctly, going to something like yoga, although yoga is somewhat of a stressor as well, especially if you're pushing it, especially like kind of hot yoga and stuff like that. But like, you know, an easier yoga class where you're just kind of like getting out of your head, getting into your body. Training can also do that. If you are the type of person that's really cerebral in your head all day when you work, you know, taking a step back, getting into your body, doing movement, whether it's in the gym, whether it's whatever, can actually be a de-stressor. And then,
yeah, I quite like very light aerobic exercise.
Yeah, like walking is great. Yeah. You know, a little bit of a jog where you're kind of just out of breath, where it's like you can't, like, you can kind of get your thoughts forming. Like a lot of people do find that, like, if you read through people's autobiographies, like really smart people's autobiographies, you'll see a lot of it recurring where it's like, oh yeah, I go for walks in the morning, it really stimulates my mind.
Yeah, so that's what Einstein used to do. And he used to do what they call them, thought experiments. Where he literally just sit and just think about his thoughts and stuff and try to rationalize things. And like as you said, like you kind of see that with a lot of successful people. They either take a lot of time for themselves outside of the in the moment stressful stuff, or they'll get out and walk and kind of be present in nature and things like that. And I think that probably does have its own benefits, like actually being outdoors, like like listening
Fresh
to the
air and
sounds, like
stuff,
breathing
like,
in fresh air and things like that, as opposed to being stuck up in a gym in that real stressful environment, kind of, especially if you're going hard. But like that light aerobic exercise, I think is really helpful.
100% in on that, right? So they've got their training maybe on point. They're not hammering themselves in the gym. They're getting maybe some light exercise. They're getting out of their bodies. They're sleeping more. They're doing a few breath exercises. They're on point, right? Are we bringing in some sort of supplementation? Are we doing anything like that? For the majority of people, is that needed? Because you see a lot of stuff online where it's like, take this super duper X supplement and all your stress will be gone. Like people have supplements for everything, and then I like biochemistry, but a lot of the stuff that people are claiming is factually incorrect. But is it something that we kind of think of?
Yeah, like I think it's one of the things that it's like, it's not even the icing on the cake, it's like the sprinkles on the cherry on the icing on the cake. Like I think you need to really have everything else like down before you're even going to notice the difference with these things. I think that's the problem. Like people often add in supplements when they're in just dire straits, like you've got nothing together and you're expecting a supplement to make a difference, and you're not even in a position to be able to notice that difference if you are in that deep state of like sleep deprivation and everything. But like I've tried a couple of like kind of stress management, de-stress, whatever supplements. The only thing I've ever kind of noticed a bit of a difference with was maybe ashwagandha, or maybe using L-theanine with caffeine is another one that kind of tends to reduce like the jitteriness and gives you a kind of a more clear mental focus, so you don't feel quite as jittery or stressed or anxious. But other than that, like I've tried a couple of things like rhodiola. Hard to tell. Like I know there's research in biochemistry for some of these things, but I think the most important thing is that you're actually able to notice a difference. I think because that's what people are generally struggling with, is that actual perception. What do you think?
Yeah, no, 100%. I would definitely be looking at L-theanine. Rhodiola is good. I kind of prefer rhodiola to ashwagandha, but that's because I don't sleep as much as you do, because you have lions.
Literally just made that up.
Yeah, and rhodiola is a little bit better for kind of sleep deprivation, stress, and that would be like my main stressor in life. Even though I do prefer sleeping less. And ashwagandha is really good as well. Personally, I get more out of rhodiola than ashwagandha, but I can see why some people would use the opposite way around. But they would be the main three ones that I'll be focused on. Like you can go into there's hundreds of different adaptogens like Siberian ginseng and all these other ones that like there's actually hundreds. You can get into like mushrooms and all this kind of stuff, but it's like the ones that probably are the best ones to take: L-theanine, rhodiola, ashwagandha. But like Gary said, it means diddly fucking squat unless you have everything else down. Like don't think, I'm 10 out of 10 stressed, I'm going to take some L-theanine and I'm going to be 1 out of 10 stressed. I'm going to be, this Zen state. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that. It might bring you down from that 10 to a 9.5, that minuscule amount. Whereas, actually sleeping loads, or getting enough sleep rather, and, actually prioritizing and executing your day, that brings you down from that 10 to a 2. So I think, there's bigger things that you can do. It is that kind of that like little icing on the cake. Yeah,
like supplementation is always like, it always is the lowest barrier of entry, because like literally all it requires is you to just like
this pill,
hand over your money, put the pill in your mouth, that's it, done. There's no time investment, and like time is a much more difficult thing to invest than money, especially if you have it. So like actually organizing your day and everything is going to make a much bigger impact 10 times over. So I wouldn't be handing money over to any supplement company too quickly anyway.
Yeah.
Fair?
That's a triage tip for today.